And I'm Dan Novak.
This is VOA News. I'm Marissa Melton. House lawmakers have been grilling TikTok's chief over the popular video-sharing app's data security and content. AP Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports.
Before the hearing, Shou Chu told reporters he was excited.
There are many misconceptions about our company.
From there, Chu was hammered by lawmakers on both sides.
Your platform should be banned.
Commerce Committee Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers said TikTok threatens American security due to the platform's Chinese parent company. Chu says TikTok's been trying to avoid a U.S. ban by announcing plans to protect American user data by storing it on Oracle servers.
This eliminates the concern that some of you have shared with me that TikTok user data can be subject to Chinese law.
TikTok is already banned on official devices here at the White House, at the Pentagon, in Congress, and more than half the states. A complete ban, though, would risk both political and popular backlash, with the ACLU, among others, saying it would set a dangerous precedent for restricting speech. Sagar Meghani at the White House.
The top U.S. military officer Mark Milley told lawmakers on Thursday that Iran could make enough fissile material for a nuclear bomb in less than 2 weeks and could produce a nuclear weapon in several more months. Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the United States remains committed to preventing Iran from fielding a nuclear weapon. The estimate is a drastic change from 2018, when the Trump administration pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. At that time, it was estimated that Iran would need about a year to produce the weapons-grade fuel needed for one nuclear bomb. You can find more on this story and all the stories we're covering at our website, voanews.com. From Washington, this is VOA News. Iranian President Volodymyr Zelensky Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Thursday urged Europe to increase and speed up its supply of weapons to his country, as well as impose additional sanctions on Russia, saying otherwise the war could drag on for years. In a long and sharply worded video addressed to EU leaders, Zelensky said it was up to the 27-nation bloc to take action to contain Russia after the war has dragged on for more than a year. In particular, he reiterated demands for long-range missiles, more ammunition, and more modern aircraft, and said the EU needs to speed up the process to grant Ukraine membership. He made the comments as EU leaders held talks with UN Chief Antonio Guterres. Zelensky was particularly critical of what he called the EU's delay in signaling stronger sanctions against Russia. Protesters angry with French President Emmanuel Macron and his plan to raise the retirement age blocked access to an airport terminal, sat on train tracks, clashed with police, and threw projectiles at a police station in a day of demonstrations across France. On Thursday, Reuters' Matthew Laratanda reports.
The ongoing nationwide protests in France over plans by the government to raise the retirement age by 2 years saw another day of disruption on Thursday, events which President Emmanuel Macron has recently compared to the storming of the U.S. Capitol by Donald Trump supporters 2 years ago. The plan is to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. For comparison, the U.S. is slowly raising its retirement age to 67, and the U.K. plans to go to 68.
That's Reuters' Matthew Laratanda reporting. Hundreds of Greek workers gathered outside the French embassy in Athens on Thursday, joined by French nationals living in Greece to show support for the striking workers in France over pension reforms. The rally was organized by the labor movement of the Greek Communist Party. Greek supporters also traveled to France on Thursday to participate in the strikes there. The New York City prosecutor on Thursday rejected a demand by congressional Republican lawmakers that he hand over documents linked to his investigation of former President Donald Trump's $130,000 hush money payment to porn star ahead of the 2016 election to buy her silence about an affair she claims to have had with Trump. And Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a televised address on Thursday that he's determined to proceed with judicial reforms amid unprecedented nationwide protests against the government's overhaul plan. His comments came at the end of another day of mass protests across Israel, some violent against the government. Marissa Melton, VOA News. This is VOA News. I'm Marissa Melton. U.S. President Joe Biden and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Friday pledged to stand together in friendship and against authoritarian regimes from Russia to Iran to China.
Because of our shared prosperity is deeply connected to our shared security. And the past years have proven that Canada and the United States are not insulated from the challenges that impact the rest of the world. The world needs Canada and the United States working together.
The two leaders affirmed their commitment to support Ukraine as the war-torn country battles against Russia's invasion. They also vowed to build up North American competitiveness in the face of economic challenges from China. Ahead of their meeting, the two countries also reached an agreement updating a treaty aimed at stopping asylum seekers traversing the U.S.-Canada land border via unofficial crossings. Here's the Prime Minister.
After midnight tonight, police and border officers will enforce the agreement and return irregular border crossers to the closest port of entry with the United States.
That's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The United Nations said Friday it was deeply concerned by what it said were summary executions of prisoners of war by both Russian and Ukrainian forces on the battlefield. The allegations come shortly after Kyiv accused Russian forces of killing a captured Ukrainian serviceman who was filmed saying "Glory to Ukraine" before being shot dead. The head of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, Matilda Wagner, said at a press conference in Kyiv on Friday that her organization had recently recorded killings by both sides. She expressed deep concern over the alleged executions of 15 Ukrainian prisoners by Russian armed forces after their capture, and she said the Wagner mercenary group, which claims to be leading Russia's assault for Bakhmut, was responsible for 11 killings. VOA News. There's been a new threat sent to the Manhattan District Attorney investigating former President Donald Trump. AP correspondent Lisa Dwyer.
A powdery substance was found with a threatening letter in a mailroom at the offices of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. It's the latest security scare as the prosecutor weighs a potential historic indictment of former President Donald Trump. The letter said, "Alvin, I'm going to kill you." That's according to a person familiar with the matter. Officials determined the substance was not dangerous and was sent to a city lab for further investigation. The discovery was in the same court building where a grand jury on the Trump case is expected to resume work on Monday. Hours earlier, Trump had posted on his Truth Social platform that any criminal charge against him could lead to, quote, potential death and destruction. Trump also posted a photo of himself holding a baseball bat next to a picture of Bragg. On Thursday, Trump referred to Bragg, Manhattan's first black district attorney, as an animal. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
A Tennessee commission has voted to strip away police powers from 4 of the 5 officers fired and charged in the deadly beating of motorist Tyre Nichols in Memphis. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn.
The Peace Officers Standards and Training Commission has voted to decertify 3 of the 5 officers arrested in connection with the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols in January. A 4th officer, Desmond Mills, voluntarily surrendered his certification. His lawyer said it's meaningless at this point and that his time was better spent defending his client, saying Mills was wrongly indicted on the second-degree murder count. The Memphis Police Department had requested the decertification of 7 former officers, including a supervisor who retired before he could be terminated. I'm Jackie Quinn.
Bosnia's autonomous Serb Republic has moved toward criminalizing acts of defamation and insult despite international criticism and protests by journalists who see the new law as a crackdown on free speech. The regional parliament on Thursday passed draft amendments to the criminal code, introducing fines of $3,200 to $65,000 for damaging a person's honor or reputation and for publishing damaging videos, photos, or documents without consent. U.S. stocks closed higher on Friday, marking the end of a tumultuous week as Federal Reserve officials calmed investor fears over a potential liquidity crisis in the banking sector, while all 3 major U.S. stock indexes started the session sharply lower on the heels of a sell-off among European banks. Those losses reversed by the time of the closing bell and at the conclusion of a week marked by Fed interest rate hikes and mounting worries over the health of the banking system. All 3 indexes recorded weekly gains. Marissa Melton, VOA News. This is VOA News. I'm Marissa Melton. Russia says it will station tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus. This, according to President Vladimir Putin on Saturday. It would mark the first time since the mid-1990s that Moscow would have based such arms outside the country. Putin made the announcement at a time of growing tensions with the West over the Ukraine war, as some Russian commentators speculate about possible nuclear strikes. The United States, the world's other nuclear superpower, has reacted cautiously. A senior administration official noted that Russia and Belarus had talked about such a deal over the past year and said there were no signs Moscow planned to use its nuclear weapons. U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell are due in the southern U.S. state of Mississippi on Sunday to survey the damage from a devastating tornado that killed some 25 people in a small community. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn reports on the damage.
Ain't no houses left up.
Rolling Fork, Mississippi resident Shedrick B. says his neighborhood is just devastated. Houses and trees are flattened.
The little restaurants we got, the gas station, all of that's over with, gone.
He and his girlfriend and 2 children huddled in a closet after hearing that roar.
I was just holding them tight. She was praying.
AP correspondent Emily Wagster Pettis in Rolling Fork.
The scale of destruction in this small town is really astounding.
She says it's obvious some people did not survive, with trailer homes taking the hardest hit. The storm, described as a supercell, also knocked out trees and power lines in Alabama and Tennessee. I'm Jackie Quinn.
You can keep up on that story and all the stories we're covering at our website, voanews.com. This is VOA News. Donald Trump used his first election rally in Waco, Texas on Saturday to rail against the prosecutors investigating him. He told supporters gathered at Waco's airport on Saturday that the investigations swirling around him were something straight out of the Stalinist Russia horror show, to use his turn of phrase. Trump is being investigated by prosecutors in Manhattan for campaign finance violations stemming from his alleged payment of hush money to an adult film actress ahead of the 2016 election. A special counsel appointed by the Department of Justice is investigating allegations he hoarded top-secret documents and masterminded a plot seeking to overturn the 2020 election. The Taliban says it's still trying to take charge of Afghanistan's embassies abroad, despite international isolation because of its restrictions on women and girls. AP correspondent Karen Chamas.
In a video, the government's main spokesperson said they had sent diplomats to at least 14 countries to take charge of other diplomatic missions abroad. The UN and foreign governments have been extremely critical of the Taliban's treatment of female education and employment. As a result, the international community in general remains wary of officially recognizing the Taliban. In Kabul, 10th grade student Tarawat told the AP she has few prospects under the Taliban's rule. We are living with an uncertain future. Women's futures are wasted because they cannot study and go to school. Despite the disapproval to Taliban policies on women and girls, some countries retain an active diplomatic mission in Afghanistan, including Pakistan, Turkey, Qatar and China. I'm Karen Chamas.
In the United States, police in South Texas say 2 migrants are dead and others hospitalized after being found in a freight train. AP correspondent Ben Thomas.
The Uvalde Police Department says dispatchers received a 911 call Friday afternoon from someone saying a group of migrants were suffocating in a freight train car that had been traveling near the U.S.-Mexico border. The Border Patrol was able to stop the train, and police say they found about 15 migrants. Union Pacific Railroad says the people were in 2 cars, 12 in a shipping container, including the 2 who died, and 3 in a hopper car. At least 10 of the migrants were sent to hospitals. Union Pacific says the train was traveling east from Eagle Pass, bound for San Antonio. I'm Ben Thomas.
French police again clashed with protesters Saturday as campaigners sought to stop the construction of reservoirs in the southwest. Several protesters and members of security forces were wounded in the clashes around Sainte-Soline as campaigners sought to stop the construction of reservoirs for the agricultural industry. Local authorities estimated the crowd at about 6,000 people. Marissa Melton, VOA News.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukraine's government is calling for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to counter what it calls the Kremlin's nuclear blackmail by announcing plans to store tactical atomic weapons in Belarus, AP correspondent Sarah Nafa reports.
One Ukrainian official said that Russia has taken Belarus as a nuclear hostage, but Moscow said it was making the move in response to the West's increasing military support for Ukraine. Putin announced the plan in a television interview that aired on Saturday, saying it was triggered by a UK decision this past week to provide Ukraine with armor-piercing rounds containing depleted uranium. Putin argued that by deploying its tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus, Russia was following the lead of the United States. He noted that Washington has nuclear weapons based in Belgium, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. In response, Ukraine's foreign ministry condemned the move, stating that the world must be united against someone who endangers the future of human civilization. I'm Sarah Nafa.
Tens of thousands of Israelis have poured into the streets across the country in a spontaneous outburst of anger after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly fired his defense minister for challenging the Israeli leader's judicial overhaul plan. Protesters in Tel Aviv blocked a main highway and lit large bonfires Sunday while police scuffled with protesters outside Netanyahu's private home in Jerusalem. The unrest is deepening a months-long crisis over Netanyahu's overhaul plan of the judiciary. South Korea's military says it detected North Korea firing at least one ballistic missile toward the sea off its eastern coast, adding to a recent flurry in weapons tests as the United States steps up its military exercises with the South to counter the North's growing threat. Follow us on the VOA mobile app. This is VOA News. A large explosion left a wide crater and damaged buildings in western Russia on Sunday. Steve Karish has more.
Russia's state news agency TASS, quoting local law enforcement officials, say the blast was caused by a Ukrainian drone. Kyiv has not commented. Kirovisk is in the Tula region, about 300 kilometers from Russia's border with Ukraine and 175 kilometers south of Moscow. Steve Karish, VOA News, Washington.
A state of emergency has been declared for the U.S. southern state of Mississippi as it grapples with the trail of tornado destruction that has killed at least 26 people. Reuters correspondent Matthew Laratunda reports.
Disaster relief efforts are pouring into Mississippi, grappling with the 170-mile trail of destruction there.
It totaled everything.
Johnny Carather lives in Silver City, Mississippi, one of the string of towns hit by the rare and powerful tornado on Friday. At least 24 people have been killed, hundreds of buildings leveled, 26,000 are without power. Many of the residents here are facing an uncertain future now. It has a population of 1,900, and according to census data, about a fifth are below the poverty line.
Reuters correspondent Matthew Laratunda. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris arrived in Ghana to begin a week-long trip to Africa. Her stops in Ghana, Tanzania, and Zambia are intended to deepen U.S. relations on the continent. Upon landing in Ghana's capital on Sunday, Harris was greeted by schoolchildren, dancers, and drummers. She said she wants to promote economic growth and food security, and she welcomed the chance to witness firsthand the extraordinary innovation and creativity that's occurring on the continent. Ghana is known as one of Africa's most stable democracies, but it's recently been beset by economic and security challenges. A Florence, Italy museum and the city's mayor are inviting parents and students from a Florida charter school to visit and see Michelangelo's David. The invitation comes after the school principal was forced to resign following parental complaints that an image of the nude Renaissance masterpiece was shown in a sixth-grade art class. The Italian response has been incredulous and highlights how U.S. culture wars are often perceived in Europe. Even amid a rise in right-wing sentiment and governance on the continent, the Renaissance and its masterpieces are generally above the fray. Find more on these stories and the podcast Flashpoint Ukraine and Flashpoint Iran on our website, voanews.com. I'm Joe Ramsey.